Hey you guys, it's Amelia. Today I'm going to show you how to edit with Portra 160+1. It's from the preset pack. It's a Visco Push-Pull 06, I believe. So I don't want you to think that I'm telling you, how you should do your work, because as artists and photographers, having different styles is what makes it so wonderful. But when we're working as a team and for a specific company, we do need to make sure all of our work is consistent, because we don't want any bride to be disappointed in the quality of work she got versus what she saw. So that's why we're just going to go over this. This edit fits the theme of BTM, so we need to make sure all of our work kind of goes through the same process that I'm going to go through with some of these images. Okay, so I'm going to start with this one. This is a picture I took in the summer, and I will flip before and after for you and just walk you through step by step how I would use that preset and tweak it. And I don't want you to think that, you just click a preset and you're good to go. You probably know that presets require so much tweaking, and it's really not a cure-all for editing. You still need to understand how to use all of these tools on the right side of your screen. Okay, so let me get started. I'll show you before. Okay, so before, it's super, super green. The exposure is fine, in my opinion, but the colors aren't good, and there's distractions in the background. And whenever you're shooting, especially when you're shooting at Tibble Fork, there are so many distractions in the background, and those need to be removed. I know we like to send a lot of edits, and I think that's awesome, but we also need to take the time to make sure our images are clean and distraction free. Okay, so I'm just going to reset this image and take you through step by step. So first I'm going to apply the preset, and that looks nothing like the final result. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is press Q on the keyboard. That's the spot removal tool. I'll make sure the feather is all the way up so the transition is smooth. I'll just scribble over it. Sometimes I use heel, sometimes I use clone. It just depends on every situation. I think this is one where clone might be better, so it doesn't mess up the horse's back right there. Okay, that looks good. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's all bokeh anyway, and nobody would know. Okay, so now our background is distraction free, before and after, but I think the picture still looks too dark and the contrast is too harsh. So I'm gonna warm it up a little bit. Our image here at BTM, it's very warm, it's a little moodier, our shadows are dark and they're rich, they're not flat and matte, and our skin tones are like warm and creamy. So that's what we have to achieve for every image, no matter what light we shoot in. So when in doubt, be more prone to go warmer and pinker. Green skin tones aren't flattering, and of course pink aren't either, but at least it's a little more natural. So if something looks off, always play with your white balance. Okay, next I actually skip right down to the HSL sliders. Something about bright green I find super tacky and distracting, and I think if we could all get in the habit of desaturating super green grass and trees, our work would look so much more professional and consistent. So I'm going to desaturate the green, and so much of green is actually made up of yellow. So I'm going to also desaturate that. The only time you need to be careful with that is when your subject is blonde. So just don't go too crazy. I go to my hue, and then I bring my yellows a little more orange and my greens a little more yellow. That just totally warmed up the grass and took away that distraction of like this neon toxic looking grass. Okay, it's already looking so much better just by taking away the green. When it comes to luminance, I don't have a preference if we go lighter or darker. I think both look good. In this case, darker is adding a weird fringe around the horse's legs, so I'm going to go up a little bit lighter. Okay, that looks good. In other cases, I think if the blue sky is showing, that can also be distracting and look a little bit tacky. So desaturate your blues too. So desaturate green grass or blue skies. Just bring more attention to the subject and make sure you're not desaturating something that they're wearing too much, because I know that can bother clients a little bit. Okay, so split toning, I'm sure you know, but This is just going to be the tint of your highlights, and this is the tint of your shadows. I bring mine up to about 25. That's a little bit orange. And then I bring my saturation up to like a 5. It's barely noticeable, but it just helps to warm things up. And I do the same for the shadows. So about 25-ish. And just warm up the shadows. And then if you can't tell if it did anything, just go over here and see before and after. Okay, and then you can sharpen it a little bit, doesn't matter. I don't really mess with this stuff too much. I prefer a slight vignette, but nothing too crazy, and then I drag my midpoint all the way. And then I think grain is just preference, but every image that I edit for BTM does have about an 18 in grain. Okay, so I'm going to go back up and we can play with our exposure now. I don't touch the tone curve at all. I think that's the only reason I use this preset. So Portra 160 plus 1, I use it for this tone curve. So our HSL sliders look good. Sometimes when you're using this filter, it can turn the skin a little bit too orange, and that's a bad thing. So I always go to hue, and red is already set to be a little more orange. I just zero that out just in case, because that does have a slight effect on the skin. And then also if the skin is looking too orange, play around with your orange sliders. You can always drop the saturation down a little bit and your luminance up a little bit. My subject here actually doesn't like when I do that because she's so pale in the first place. So just be careful when you're playing with luminance. You don't want to do something unflattering for your client. So just keep it as natural and as real as possible. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'll bump up my exposure a little bit, and our look is a little bit moodier. I know some people like the airy look, but that's just not our look, and you are welcome to do it on your free time, just not with the company. I like to bring my highlights down because I want more detail showing, so there's more detail in the lace of her shirt or her dress, and a little more detail in the grass. So I bring my highlights down. Depending on the photo, I usually bring my shadows up. Whites I leave about the same, and blacks I leave about the same. Okay, now let's do a before and after. It does look a little bit too orange, but that's just because we're so used to seeing it with neon green grass. And if I was feeling really generous, I would go in here and smooth out her skin just a tiny bit. I would press K on the keyboard to get the adjustment brush, and then I would press O on the keyboard so I can see where I've drawn. I just go over her skin. Okay, so I'm going to press O again. And super smoothed out, perfected skin doesn't look good. We still want our clients to have texture on their face. That's a good thing. So really when I do this, I'm just trying to even out like the shadows and the highlights a little bit. And I will bring down the sharpness just a tiny bit. So it didn't do much, but it looks better. Okay, so that's all I would do for that image.